5 children went to bed on Christmas Eve. By morning, they were gone. No bodies were ever found. And 80 years later, nobody knows what happened to them. George and Jennie Sodder were Italian immigrants who had built a good life in Fayetteville, West Virginia. They had 10 children. On the night of December 24, 1945, 9 of them were home. The older ones had surprised the younger ones with Christmas gifts. The children were so excited they asked to stay up past bedtime. Jennie said yes, just a little longer. She took the youngest, 3-year-old Sylvia upstairs and went to sleep. It was the last normal moment the Sodder family would ever have. At around 12:30 in the morning, Jennie was woken by a strange phone call. A woman's voice asked for someone she didn't know, then laughed and hung up. Jennie thought nothing of it. Minutes later, she heard a loud thud on the roof. Then she smelled smoke. The house was on fire. George and Jennie escaped with 4 of their children, but 5 of them, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jennie, 8, and little Betty, just 5 years old, were nowhere to be found. George tried to re-enter the house 3 times. He broke a window and reached inside, slicing open his arm. The flames drove him back every time. He tried to use the water pump. It wouldn't work. He ran to get the ladder he always kept outside. It was gone. He watched his house burn to the ground, and his children never came out. When investigators arrived the next morning, they expected to find remains. 5 children had supposedly burned in that house. But here is where this story gets deeply strange. There were no bones, no teeth, no remains of any kind. In virtually every house fire in history, at least some bone fragments survive. They are almost indestructible at normal fire temperatures. But at the Sodder house, there was nothing. The fire department declared the blaze accidental, caused by faulty wiring. The 5 children were officially declared dead on December 30th, 1945, just 6 days later, without a single piece of physical evidence that they had died. George and Jennie refused to accept it, and the more they looked, the stranger it got. The family's telephone line had not burned. It had been cut, deliberately sliced through, which is why Jennie could not call for help that night. The ladder George always kept against the house had been moved and hidden in a ditch 75 feet away. The water pump that failed had been working perfectly the day before. The family's Christmas lights, powered by the same electrical system that supposedly caused the fire, stayed on and glowing for hours after the blaze started. And then there was the man who had sold George fire insurance months earlier. When George refused to buy it, the man screamed at him, "Your house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed. You will be paid back for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." That same man later sat on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident. Years later, the family discovered something that shook them to their core. The fire chief had apparently found some bone fragments and what he described as a heart at the scene. But he never told the Sodder family. When they finally confronted him, he led them to where he had buried these remains. When they had the so-called heart tested, it was a beef liver. Someone had placed a beef liver in the ash to fake evidence of remains. The bones that were found belonged to someone significantly older than any of the 5 missing children. And when the family sent fragments to the Smithsonian Institution in 1949, the Smithsonian confirmed the bones showed no signs of exposure to intense heat. The children had not burned in that fire. So what happened to them? Theory 1, the Sicilian Mafia. George Sodder had publicly and loudly criticized Mussolini and Italian fascism for years. In a community with deep ties to Italy, this made enemies. The theory is that the fire was arson, set to cover a kidnapping. The children were taken that night, possibly back to Italy, as retribution. Theory 2, the mysterious photograph. In 1967, 22 years after the fire, Jennie received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his mid-20s. On the back, someone had written, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, A90132 or 35. The man in the photo bore a striking resemblance to what Louis would have looked like as an adult. The family hired an investigator to follow the lead. He disappeared without a trace and was never heard from again. Theory 3, witnesses. Multiple people reported seeing the children alive after the fire. A woman claimed she saw all 5 watching the house burn from a passing car. A hotel employee in Charleston reported seeing 4 of the children with 2 unknown adults the morning after. Silent, expressionless, refusing to speak. When police arrived at the hotel, they were gone. For the rest of their lives, George and Jennie Sodder kept a billboard on Route 16. The faces of their 5 missing children stared out at passing cars for nearly 4 decades, beneath a single question. What was their fate? Kidnapped? Murdered? Are they still alive? George died in 1969, never knowing the answer. Jennie died in 1989, still searching. Their surviving children searched their whole lives too. The youngest survivor, Sylvia, who was 3 years old the night of the fire, died in 2021 at the age of 79. Until the very end, she believed her brothers and sisters had not burned, that they had survived, and that somewhere, somehow, they had lived their lives without ever being able to come home. The Sodder children case remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in American history. 5 children, no remains, a cut phone line, a moved ladder, a beef liver in place of a human heart, a mysterious photograph mailed 22 years later, and a family that never stopped looking. So here is the question that has kept investigators, historians, and families awake for 80 years. Were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty Sodder victims of a fire? Or did someone take them that Christmas Eve and make sure they could never be found? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe to GlowGist, because this is just the beginning.